My guest today is Matt McCormick, Chief Technology Officer of RSA's Global Public Sector. Matt, welcome to the program today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Start by explaining to us the environment we're in today with government cybersecurity.
Well, government cybersecurity is not that different than the same challenges the commercial sector is facing. There are some similarities and some differences. One of the problems that everybody is facing is the amount of data. Everybody's holding more and more data, and you see it in the news all the time. Companies with these huge customer databases, and you ask yourself, why are they holding all that information? Government's in the same situation. Government has 100 years of data when you look at some of the large agencies. And the amount of data is just eclipsing some of their capabilities, their security capabilities. And you have a lot of systems that were built in the 80s, 90s. And so we're trying to secure 20-year-old systems against modern security threats, modern hackers, and it's just a real challenge.
When you say they're holding a lot of data, and why are they holding that much, what options do they have?
So one of the interesting things you see in the commercial world is a lot of the companies have mandatory destruction. So after a certain number of years, unless there's a reason, employee data, customer data is actually destroyed. And that eliminates some of the threat that company would have. Obviously, there are retention requirements. The government has different retention requirements, sometimes 7 years, sometimes indefinitely. And so because of that, people hold information kind of like a pack rat because you're afraid to get rid of it. So unless you tell people you need to destroy after a couple years, they're just going to hold everything.
When you say that it's destroyed, is it ever really gone?
Well, it depends. And in security, the answer is always it depends. And so when you talk about destroying data, obviously, people will reference certain agencies and certain things that have been in the news. The answer is, in general, it's never completely destroyed. The government is very good at backing up systems. The redundancy mindset, the catastrophe mindset. You always want to operate under, if DC were ever hit with some catastrophe, whether natural or man-made, the government still needs to be able to function. So many government agencies store backups of their data. Typically you want to do in a different power grid, and if you're on the east side of the Mississippi, the general rule is go to the west side of the Mississippi. And so, my experience, the agencies that I've worked at, we always had redundant backup capability. So no, nothing is ever completely destroyed unless somebody really wants it destroyed.
But if it was destroyed, it would just take a little bit of an effort to get it back.
You would have to look in some different places. And it's the same thing on your home computer. When you go through and hit delete on a file or an email, if you're not using a web-based email, it's not gone. The only way for it to be gone is to overwrite the sectors on the hard drive. So it's the same rules apply to your home PC or your home Mac as apply to the government. Lots of people hit delete, they believe it's gone, it's not gone.
Let's get into some of the similarities and differences a little deeper between private sector and government.
So I think a computer is a computer, data is data. One of the primary differences is why the data is being kept, how it's being used. What you're seeing now is you're starting to see the government do some of the things that the private sector does, the concept of data mining, the ability to start doing specific analysis of individual people. The same way when you go to the grocery store and you put in your phone number and you get a couple cents off your bill, the grocery store now knows what you buy on what day you buy it. It's the concept of being able to data mine and dig through that data to find out specific information on people. So the government is starting to do that to, everything from, predicting weather to, the Census Bureau figuring out the patterns of migration. So the government is getting better with their use of data like the commercial sector. But one of the challenges is the government has a lot of IT systems and IT capabilities that have been around for a long time. So if you look at a lot of commercial companies today, they may have only been around 10 years, 2 years, 3 years. They don't have 40 years of legacy IT that they're supporting. And so because of that, you see a lot of companies that are more nimble. They don't have the overhead, whereas a lot of these federal agencies have a very traditional IT infrastructure with a lot of older systems. And the government's trying to upgrade some of those, but it's a challenge because of the sheer size of a lot of these.
And I think you're seeing even with an agency like TSA, where they're trying to use as much data as possible to expedite the process of getting people through the airports and sort of building off of what they already have, right?
Correct, correct. And one of the challenges in the world of data is too much data. So, we say in the cybersecurity world, we use a lot of threat intelligence. So basically, we want to know, is there, viruses or malware coming out of a certain part of the country or the world? And then we try to go through that data and find the needle in the haystack. Well, the problem is we have too much hay. And the same thing in data. The more hay you get, the harder it is to find the needle. And so we have to start, decreasing the amount of data that's held. And then if you look at commercial America, you see a lot of companies that you're like, gee, I've never done business with that company. Why do they have a file on me? Because you'll get a letter in the mail saying, unfortunately, we were recently breached, and you were in our customer database, and you're like, I don't even know who you are. Why do you have my data? Well, because in commercial America, people buy and sell data all the time.
How about from a higher level, from a strategic analysis level, what companies, what agencies can do with all of this stuff to help them really drive their decision making going forward?
I think one of the things that you have to think about is the risk. And that is something that I think some of the recent federal breaches that have gone on have made people take a step back and look at the risk of holding all this data. So while there is obviously quantifiable benefits, there are good things you can do with the data. There's also bad things that can happen with the data. And I think a lot of people are starting to do that sort of analysis, which is, it's good and there are benefits, but do we really need all of that information? Because when you are breached, you realize very quickly that you have a lot of stuff that's going on. And so because of that, people are making strategic business-based decisions. What do I want my employees doing? Can my employees be working at home, or do they need to be in the building? There's a lot of human resources type decisions you can make based on the quality of your IT. And here in DC, you see that a lot, where a lot of federal employees are allowed to telecommute on certain days. And they can do that because their IT infrastructure supports working from home, but you don't want them working from Starbucks.
Before we go to the break, what can federal IT leaders do to make sure that the policies and procedures that they have in place are adhered to on a day-to-day basis?
So one of the biggest challenges that, in my experience, having been a federal employee for a long time, is the enforcement of existing policies. So there's lots of policies that say do not do X, Y, Z, and people on a regular basis do X, Y, and Z, and they get a phone call or an email or a visit, but there isn't always a follow-through. And so because of that, you have to have the perception, and people have to understand that if you do violate certain IT or security protocols, that there is and I don't want to use the word penalty, but that there is a consequence. And I think oftentimes people overlook that phase because they say, well, we want to be a friendlier agency, we want to be a warmer and cuddlier agency. But some of those actions significantly expose the agency to some very bad things. And some of that follow-through isn't there.
Let's pick up with that whenever we come back.
Okay.
We're going to pause here for a short break. My guest today is Matt McCormick, the Chief Technology Officer of RSA's Global Public Sector, on today's Cybersecurity and Rapid Response, sponsored by RSA Security. I'm your host, Jason Fornicola, and you're listening to federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.